You'll regret this, I won't obey, native girl said when Lone Rancher paid $2 for her at the auction. The town of Red Creek was small, dusty, and almost frozen in time. Every Saturday, the local auction drew people from the nearby ranches and farms. It was a place where cattle, tools, and sometimes odd items were sold to the highest bidder. The wooden stands creaked under the weight of townsfolk who came to watch, talk, and maybe get lucky. Among the crowd that day, the sun was high, hot, and relentless, painting the dirt roads golden and making the air shimmer with heat. Around, their laughter echoing while older men and women leaned against posts, chatting quietly about the week's work and weather.
In the midst of the auction, a lone figure arrived on horseback.
Breath. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a face shaped by years of outdoor work. His hands were calloused, and his eyes carried a quiet seriousness. People knew him as the Lone Rancher, a man who had always kept to himself. Some said he was mysterious. Others said he simply valued solitude and hard work over gossip. Bird.
Today, however, he had ridden into town for something unusual, though no one could guess what it would be. The auction started as usual.
The auctioneer's voice boomed, announcing the next lot. Barrels, ropes, cows, and old farming equipment. The townspeople murmured and raised hands, bidding small amounts, haggling and laughing at their occasional victories. Then, unexpectedly, a new lot appeared. It wasn't a cow, or a sack of grain, or a tool. It was a young girl.
She stepped onto the wooden platform with a defiant look. Her dark hair was tied back, and her eyes shone with a mix of fear, anger, and pride.
Even from a distance, it was clear she wasn't going to stay quiet or comply with anything. She scanned the crowd, daring anyone to look at her with disrespect. People in the audience whispered among themselves. It wasn't common for a girl to appear at an auction, and the tension in the air grew thick, almost electric. The auctioneer, sensing the discomfort, raised his voice. Lot number 43. A fine young girl, strong and able. Who'll start the bidding? His words hung awkwardly in the air. The girl's lips pressed into a thin line. She stomped her foot and shouted, her voice strong and sharp, "You'll regret this! I won't obey anyone!" The crowd gasped. Some chuckled nervously, thinking it was a show, but most looked away, uncomfortable with the girl's fierce defiance. She wasn't acting scared, and that made some of the men uneasy. They weren't used to seeing such strength in someone so young. Then came the auctioneer's call. Who'll start the bidding? $1, $2. Anyone? Hands slowly rose, but the amounts were low, almost as if no one really wanted her. Then the quiet figure at the back, the Lone Rancher, stepped forward. His voice was calm but firm. $2.
A hush fell over the auction house. $2!
People stared in disbelief. Some whispered to their neighbors, "Why would he do that? What's he thinking?" But the rancher didn't explain. He didn't raise his voice or make a show of himself. He simply placed his hand on the counter, and his eyes met hers. The girl glared at him, her heart racing with a mix of fear and defiance. Who is this man? She wondered. Does he think he can control me like the others? She shook her head, her voice trembling but fierce. I said I won't obey. Do you hear me? I don't belong to anyone. The crowd watched silently. Nobody dared interrupt her. Her anger was like a spark ready to ignite. The auctioneer, flustered, tried to maintain control, but even he paused, unsure how to respond. The girl's energy filled the room, demanding attention and respect. The rancher, surprisingly, didn't seem angry or amused. Breath. He simply nodded, as if acknowledging her words but not threatened by them. His quiet confidence puzzled her. She had expected someone to yell, to punish, to force her into submission. Instead, he stood calm, as if he understood something she didn't yet understand. With a final bark from the auctioneer, the deal was done. The $2 were exchanged. Desperation and confusion.
How could anyone, let alone a stranger, pay such a small amount for her?
What did it mean? She felt trapped and furious, but at the same time, something in the rancher's steady gaze made her hesitate. The journey from the auction to the ranch began under a hot sun. The girl sat stiffly, refusing to speak. Her eyes avoided his, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Every mile they rode, she thought of ways to resist, to assert herself, to prove that she could not be controlled. The rancher didn't force her to talk. He rode beside her quietly, occasionally pointing out landmarks, describing the land, or mentioning the animals he cared for. Breaths. He didn't belittle her or make jokes at her expense. He simply rode with patience, allowing her space while observing her carefully. At one point, a small bird landed near the trail. The girl's curiosity broke through her tension. She leaned forward slightly, watching it hop and flutter. The rancher smiled faintly, noticing her interest. He pointed to the bird and whispered, "See how it moves freely. That's how life should feel. Free, even when there's work to do." The girl scowled, but listened. She didn't respond, but she couldn't ignore his words. They lingered in her mind, irritating her with their simplicity, yet also planting a seed of thought. Brad. Could someone respect her freedom while still expecting her to live with them? It seemed impossible. When they reached the ranch, the land spread wide and open. Rolling hills, grazing cattle, and a sturdy farmhouse stood proudly under the afternoon sun. The rancher guided her down from the horse. Brett. She planted her feet firmly on the ground, testing it like she was staking a claim to her own presence. Inside the house, she noticed there were no chains, no locks, no harsh rules waiting for her. The rancher showed her small room and simple belongings. Then he stepped back, folding his arms, and said, "You are safe here." Breath. "You can stay, work, or explore, but I won't force you. That choice is yours." Her anger flared again, but it was mixed with confusion.
No one had ever given her a choice like that. She had always been told what to do, when to speak, when to move, and when to obey.
Yet here, a stranger, a man who had just bought her at an auction, offered respect instead of control. That night, as she lay on the small cot staring at the ceiling, her mind raced. Grasp. She thought about the auction, the ride, and the ranch. She thought about the rancher's calm, steady presence, and how different it was from anyone else she had ever met. Desperation. Her defiance didn't fade. It simmered, ready to rise at any moment. Yet, beneath it, a tiny spark of curiosity flickered. Who was this man, really? Why did he act this way? Breath. Could anyone truly care for her without trying to dominate her? Outside, the ranch settled into quiet. The cattle lowed softly in the distance. The wind rustled the grass and the sky deepened to a rich evening blue. The girl's anger and pride battled with a strange new feeling she hadn't recognized before. A sense of possibility, of something beyond fear and obedience. The first day had ended, but the real story was only beginning. The auction was behind her, but the challenges ahead, of trust, of independence, of understanding, loomed large. She didn't yet know whether she could trust this rancher, or if she could survive in this new world without losing herself. One thing was certain, her spirit was not broken. And the rancher, outside on the porch, looked up at the stars. He didn't speak, but he knew. He had seen the fire in her eyes, the courage in her stance. He understood that this would not be easy, that she would test him, resist him, and perhaps even hate him at times. But he also knew that patience, respect, and kindness might just be stronger than any force he could ever impose. In the stillness of that night, the rancher and the girl stood on the edge of a new beginning. Two people, strangers in the world, each carrying their own history, their own scars, and their own strength. Tomorrow would bring the next step. And the journey, filled with defiance, courage, and discovery, had only just begun. The morning after her arrival, the girl woke to the sounds of the ranch stirring. The lowing of cows, the soft clatter of tools, and the distant crow of a rooster filled the air. She sat up on the cot, rubbing her eyes, still tired from the long ride and the tension of the auction day. Every muscle in her body ached. But her pride refused to let her show weakness. She had survived worse, she told herself. She would survive this too. Downstairs, she could hear the rancher moving about. The creak of floorboards, the scrape of boots on wooden planks, and the low hum of someone going about work without complaint. It was steady, calm, and somehow comforting. But she would not let herself relax just yet. Her mind was sharp, alert, always scanning for threats. She had learned long ago that life could change in a heartbeat, and she would not be caught off guard. Finally, the door opened. The rancher stepped inside with a small tray of breakfast, bread, fresh fruit, and a cup of warm milk. He set it down quietly, not making a show of authority, only offering a simple gesture of care. "Morning," he said simply.
Eat when you're ready.
The girl scowled but didn't refuse. She sat at the small table, eyeing the food cautiously. She didn't trust anyone to feed her safely, but hunger and curiosity got the better of her. As she ate, she kept her eyes on him, noticing the way he moved, the way he worked silently, and the calm in his gaze. He didn't press her to talk, which surprised her. "Do you know how to help with chores around here?" She crossed her arms. "I don't take orders from anyone," she said firmly. He nodded, accepting her words without argument. "Then you won't have to take orders. You can learn if you want to. Or you can do your own thing. The choice is yours."
Her eyes narrowed.
Nobody had ever given her that choice before. Usually she had been told what to do, how to behave, and when to speak. She wasn't used to being trusted, and it made her uncomfortable. A part of her wanted to rebel, to run, to prove that she could not be controlled. But another part, a tiny spark buried deep, was curious. Could someone actually treat her with respect and still keep her safe? The day began slowly, with her observing the rancher as he went about his tasks. He fed the animals, checked fences, and repaired tools, all with quiet efficiency. Breaths. Her defiance still strong, but her curiosity growing. She asked questions, not as a child begging for approval, but as a person trying to understand her new environment. "Why do you do everything yourself?" she asked at one point, watching him repair a broken fence post. He paused and looked at her, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Because it needs to be done, and because I like to know it's done right." "But that doesn't mean you can't help if you want." She shook her head stubbornly. "I don't work for anyone." He chuckled softly, not mockingly, just with a quiet amusement. "Then help for yourself. Do it for your own learning. You'll need these skills whether you stay or go." Despite herself, she nodded slightly. His calm and reasoned words were different from the shouting and punishment she was used to. They were strange, almost confusing. And yet, She couldn't deny they made sense. Over the next few days, life on the ranch began to reveal its rhythm. She learned to feed the animals, repair fences, and handle tools carefully. Each time she completed a task, she did it not because he told her to, but because she wanted to prove to herself that she could. He never criticized her, only guided when necessary, and even then gently. Breath. One afternoon, as the sun beat down on the hills, she tried her hand at herding cattle. The herd moved slowly, and she struggled to control them. Frustrated, she shouted at the animals, throwing her hands in the air. The rancher approached quietly and stood beside her. "Take a breath," he said calmly. "The cattle will follow if you are steady." Bray, shouting only makes them nervous. "Move with them, don't against them." She frowned but tried his method. To her surprise, it worked. The cattle moved smoothly across the pasture, following her lead. Her chest swelled with pride. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with defiance or survival. It was hers alone. That evening, as they sat by the porch watching the sunset, she asked, "Why did you pay for me? Why me?"
He looked at her thoughtfully. "Because I saw something in you."
Strength, courage, breaths, and a spark of independence that shouldn't be crushed. Most people would have tried to break it, but I wanted to see it grow. She shook her head, a mix of skepticism and curiosity in her eyes. "That's strange." "Nobody has ever said anything like that to me." He smiled faintly. "Most people don't understand it, but it's there." "I can see it." The girl remained silent, thinking about his words. For the first time, she realized that she might not need to fight him constantly. That didn't mean she would obey blindly. She still had her pride, but maybe she could respect him without losing herself.
Days turned into weeks, and a subtle bond began to form.
They worked side by side, repairing fences, feeding animals, and tending to the land. She tested him constantly, trying small acts of defiance, refusing to help with certain chores, sneaking off to explore the hills, and speaking back sharply when she disagreed. Each time he met her resistance, not with anger, but with calm understanding. One day, a sudden storm rolled over the hills. Dark clouds gathered quickly, and strong winds began to tear across the fields. The cattle became restless, and the girl felt a flash of fear. She ran to the barn, only to find some of the animals had escaped the enclosure.
Without thinking, she ran into the storm, trying to guide them back.
The rancher followed swiftly. Together, they worked through the wind and rain, calming the animals and repairing broken gates. The girl realized in that moment that she could rely on him, not to control her, but to help when danger arose. It was a strange and uncomfortable feeling, trusting someone completely, but also a relief. After the storm passed, they stood in the barn soaked and exhausted. She looked at him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and admiration. Breaths. He nodded at her silently, as if acknowledging her courage without words. That night, as she lay in her cot, she thought about the storm. For the first time, she understood that trust didn't mean weakness. It didn't mean giving up control. It meant accepting help when it was needed and recognizing strength in others. She had survived the auction, the ride, and the first days on the ranch by relying on herself. But now she was beginning to see that she didn't have to face everything alone. The rancher, meanwhile, continued his routine, always mindful of her presence but never imposing. But he left her space to explore, to learn, and to assert herself. And slowly the girl began to test herself in new ways, not just to resist, but to grow stronger, faster, smarter. By the end of the second week, the girl had earned small victories. She could handle the animals with confidence, repair fences without guidance, and even navigate the land alone. Yet she never let her guard down completely. Her independence remained intact, but she had begun to see that the rancher's presence didn't diminish it. In fact, it strengthened it in unexpected ways.
One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, she asked quietly, almost to herself, "Do you ever get lonely?" The rancher looked at her, surprised by the question.
Break. Sometimes, he admitted. But this place, these animals, and the work, they keep me busy. And now I have you to talk to, even if you don't like me much.
She frowned, but couldn't hide a small smile. It was strange to hear him speak so honestly.
In that honesty, she found a connection, a bond that wasn't forced, but earned through shared work, shared danger, and shared respect. The girl still had a long way to go. She would continue to resist, to challenge, and to assert herself. But for the first time in her life, she realized that someone might see her for who she truly was, strong, proud, independent, and still respect her choices. And the rancher knew, quietly, that patience, kindness, and understanding could do more than fear, punishment, or control ever could. They were no longer simply strangers thrown together by circumstance. They were beginning a partnership built on trust, courage, and the possibility of something stronger than either had expected. The journey was only beginning, but for the first time, both of them sensed that the future, no matter how challenging, held the promise of growth, trust, and maybe even friendship. Days on the ranch continued, each one bringing new challenges, small victories, and lessons in patience. The girl had grown stronger, faster, and more confident. She no longer stumbled clumsily with the animals, nor did she flinch when faced with the harsh realities of ranch life. But life on the ranch was not without danger, and the girl was about to learn that courage and strength could be tested in unexpected ways. One morning, the rancher noticed that the girl had been unusually quiet. Her movements were careful, measured, and deliberate. He approached her while she repaired a broken fence post. "Everything all right?" he asked gently. She shook her head, not looking at him. "I'm fine," she said sharply. But there was a tension in her voice, a weight she couldn't hide. He didn't press her, knowing that sometimes space was better than questions. Later that day, they noticed that one of the calves was missing. The little animal had wandered off, and the girl immediately went to track it. She moved quickly through the hills, calling softly to the calf. The rancher followed at a safe distance, giving her room but ready to step in if needed. Hours passed as they searched the hills and valleys. The sun climbed higher, and the girl's frustration grew. Bess. She could hear the calf's soft bleating in the distance, but the terrain was rough and unfamiliar. She climbed over rocks, pushed through thorny bushes, and waded through shallow streams. Every step tested her endurance, but she refused to give up. Finally, she spotted the calf trapped near a steep embankment, struggling to find footing. Her heart raced as she approached, knowing that one wrong move could cause the animal to fall. She reached out slowly, speaking softly, coaxing the calf toward her. The rancher arrived just in time to steady her, placing a hand on her back to prevent her from slipping. "Steady," he whispered, "Disc. You've got this." Together, they guided the calf back to safety. The girl's chest heaved with relief and pride. She had faced danger, worked alongside someone she didn't fully trust, and succeeded. It was a small victory, but for her, it felt monumental. That evening, as they returned to the ranch, the girl sat quietly by the porch. She had never felt a connection to anyone like this before. The rancher, too, was thoughtful, observing her as she stared at the fading sunset. He had seen her courage, her determination, and her unwavering spirit. "You're brave," he said quietly.
not as praise, but as a statement of fact. Not everyone would have gone after that calf alone.
I had to, she replied. I couldn't just let it stay there.
That's the kind of courage that matters, not just for yourself, but for others too. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between the girl and the rancher grew stronger.
Breaths. They still had disagreements, moments of tension, and tests of patience, but each challenge brought them closer. She began to see that strength was not only about defiance or independence, but also about trust, teamwork, and understanding. One afternoon, a group of outsiders arrived near the ranch. They were rough-looking men who questioned the rancher's decision to bring the girl into his care.
Why did you buy her for so little? One asked, sneering. You're wasting your time with someone like her. The girl's anger flared immediately. I'm not wasting anyone's time, she shouted. And I'm not someone you can judge. The rancher stepped between them calmly.
She is under my care, he said firmly. You don't get to decide her worth. The men grumbled but backed off, sensing the determination in his voice and the fire in the girl's eyes. Bow. She realized in that moment that she was not alone. Someone stood beside her, respecting her choices and protecting her when needed. That night, the girl sat by the fire, thinking about the day's events. She realized that her trust in the rancher had grown. Slowly but surely, she could rely on him without losing her independence, and that was a new, strange, and comforting feeling. The next few weeks brought more lessons and challenges. She learned to ride horses with skill, mend fences, and care for the livestock in ways she hadn't imagined. Breaths tested her patience, strength, and courage. The rancher never forced her to do anything, but he guided her, offered advice, and celebrated her successes. One day, while tending to the animals, a wild coyote appeared near the herd. The girl froze, unsure how to react. The coyote's eyes gleamed, and it crouched low, ready to attack. Her heart pounded as she considered her options. She could run, but that would leave the animals vulnerable. She could scream, but that might provoke the coyote. Before she could act, the rancher stepped forward, placing himself between her and the animal. He moved with calm precision, using his knowledge and presence to scare the coyote away without harm. The girl watched, awestruck, as he handled the situation with confidence and care. You don't always have to face danger alone,
He said quietly afterward.
but sometimes you need someone to show you how to handle it. The girl nodded, realizing that courage wasn't just about facing challenges blindly. It was about learning, observing, and working with others when necessary. She felt a deep respect for the rancher. Not fear, not submission, but genuine admiration. That evening, as they sat under the stars, the girl spoke softly, almost to herself. I never thought I could trust anyone like this. The rancher looked at her, a gentle smile on his face. Trust is earned, not given. And you've earned it, just as much as you've earned your own strength. The girl reflected on her journey so far. She had arrived at the ranch with anger, fear, and defiance. She had tested him constantly, asserting her independence at every turn. But now she realized that independence didn't mean isolation. Strength didn't mean refusing help. Courage didn't mean facing everything alone. Together they faced storms, wild animals, and challenges that tested their patience and skills. Each obstacle brought them closer, teaching lessons of resilience, trust, and mutual respect. The girl had grown in ways she never imagined possible, and the rancher had learned to appreciate the fire and determination in someone he had initially met as a stranger. As the weeks passed, the girl's defiance softened, not completely, but enough for her to consider a future on the ranch. She still demanded respect and space, but she also began to enjoy moments of companionship, shared work, and quiet understanding. She realized that being strong didn't mean pushing everyone away. It meant choosing carefully whom to trust and when to rely on others. One day, while walking through the fields, the rancher stopped and looked at her. "You've come a long way," he said. "Not just in skill, but in trust and courage." "I've learned a lot," she admitted, "but I still don't know what the future holds." Narration.
None of us do. But what matters is how we face it, together.
That night, as she lay on her cot, the girl reflected on her journey. She had arrived at the ranch with fear and anger, expecting control and punishment. Pray. Instead, she found respect, guidance, and an opportunity to grow. She realized that life could be both challenging and rewarding, both independent and shared. The rancher, outside on the porch, looked up at the sky. He knew the girl had begun to understand what he had seen in her from the start: strength, courage, and a spirit that refused to be broken. And he knew that the bond they were forming, built on trust, patience, and mutual respect, was something rare and powerful. The story of the girl and the rancher was far from over. More challenges awaited: storms, threats, and tests of character. But together they had discovered that independence and trust, courage and cooperation could coexist. They had begun a journey that would shape both of their lives, teaching lessons they would carry forever. For the girl, it was a journey of growth, trust, and courage. For the rancher, it was a journey of patience, understanding, and respect. And for both, it was the beginning of a bond that neither defiance nor danger could easily break. The sun rose over the ranch, painting the hills in soft shades of gold. The girl had learned to rise early, just as the rancher did. But today felt different. There was a tension in the air, a sense that something important was about to happen. She moved quietly, preparing for the day's work, her mind alert and focused.
Over the weeks, she had grown stronger, braver, and more confident.
Yet deep inside, she felt a flutter of uncertainty. Change was coming, and she could sense it. The morning began like any other, with feeding the animals and checking fences. But as the day progressed, a storm approached quickly from the west. The sky darkened, and winds began to whip across the fields. The animals became restless, sensing the danger before it arrived. The girl's heart quickened, remembering the last storm when she had faced the coyote and the runaway calf. She knew the real test of courage had arrived. The rancher moved calmly, directing her and the animals with steady commands. "Keep calm," he said, his voice cutting through the wind. "Work together, and everyone will be safe." The girl felt a rush of adrenaline. She realized that this was more than just a storm. It was a test of everything she had learned. She could panic, shout, or run, as she might have before. But now she had choices. She could use her strength, her knowledge, and her trust in the rancher to face the challenge. They worked side by side, securing gates, leading the animals to safety, and tying down equipment that could be swept away by the wind. The storm hit in full force, rain lashing down, lightning striking in the distance, and thunder shaking the earth. The girl's determination never wavered. She shouted over the wind, giving directions to the animals and helping the rancher steady them. At one point, a calf slipped on the muddy ground, struggling to rise. The girl rushed forward, her hands steady despite the storm. The rancher reached her side, and together they lifted the animal, guiding it to safety. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from the sense of achievement. Breaths. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting despite it. Hours passed, and the storm finally began to subside. The sky cleared, revealing the bright sun above, casting a rainbow over the hills. The girl collapsed onto a hay bale, drenched and exhausted. but a triumphant smile spread across her face. She had faced the storm, protected the animals, and worked alongside someone she trusted. For the first time, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment and belonging, pride shining in his eyes.
You did well, he said simply.
But not just today, but every day since you arrived. You've grown stronger, braver, and wiser than most people your age.
I'm proud of you!
The girl's cheeks flushed. She was not used to praise, especially from someone she respected so deeply. I couldn't have done it without you, she admitted quietly. You taught me how to handle things, how to stay calm, how to think. He shook his head gently. I only showed you the way. The courage and determination were always yours. You've learned to trust yourself, and me, without losing who you are.
That's the hardest lesson of all.
As the days passed, the girl began to take on more responsibilities on the ranch.
She rode the horses alone, managed the livestock, and repaired fences without guidance. She still tested the rancher, pushing boundaries and asserting her independence, but their bond had transformed. It was no longer simply about patience and defiance. It was about mutual respect, trust, and understanding. One afternoon, a stranger approached the ranch. He was a man from a nearby town who had heard of the girl and the rancher.
I've been told you took a girl in from an auction,
he said, his tone curious but cautious.
Some people think it's unusual, others think it's wrong. The girl stepped forward, her eyes blazing with confidence.
It's not wrong, she said firmly. I'm here because I choose to be. I'm not a child to be controlled. I'm a person with strength, courage, and the right to decide my own path. Prepared. The stranger looked at her, surprised by her words. He turned to the rancher, who nodded silently. She speaks for herself, he said, and she has every right to. The girl realized in that moment how far she had come. From the frightened, angry girl at the auction to the strong, confident young woman she had become, she had grown in ways she never imagined. She had learned that independence did not mean isolation, that courage did not mean facing everything alone, and that trust could coexist with freedom. That evening, as the sun set over the hills, the girl and the rancher stood side by side on the porch. The air was warm, and the sky was painted with shades of pink and orange. She looked at him, a quiet smile on her face. Thank you, she said softly, for everything.
Breaths. For trusting me, for teaching me, for letting me be myself.
Ooh. He smiled back, a rare, gentle smile that reached his eyes.
You taught me too, he said. You taught me patience, understanding, and the strength of a spirit that refuses to be broken. I'm proud to know you. The girl felt a warmth in her chest. She realized that life on the ranch was no longer just about survival. It was about growth, trust, and connection. Desperately, she had found a place where she could be strong and independent, yet still rely on someone who respected her choices. Over the following weeks, the ranch became a place of harmony and cooperation. The girl and the rancher worked together seamlessly, anticipating each other's movements and needs. They faced storms, wild animals, and challenges that tested their skills and courage. Each obstacle only strengthened their bond, teaching lessons of resilience, respect, and teamwork. One day, as they watched the herd grazing peacefully, the girl spoke softly. Breaths. I never thought I could feel safe and free at the same time, she said. But here. I do. The rancher nodded, understanding the depth of her words. Perhaps.
Safety and freedom can coexist, he said. You've proven that every day since you arrived.
You've earned it. The girl smiled, a mix of pride and contentment in her expression. She realized that her journey had not only been about surviving the auction or the initial days on the ranch, it had been about discovering her own strength, courage, and the power of trust. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the girl and the rancher stood together, looking out over the land. The hills, the animals, and the wide open sky stretched before them, full of possibilities. Pace. She had arrived at the ranch with anger, fear, and defiance. Now she stood with confidence, trust, and a sense of belonging. The rancher placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of her growth.
You've come a long way, he said quietly, and I have no doubt you will continue to grow, no matter what challenges lie ahead. The girl looked at him, her eyes shining.
I will, she said firmly, and I will face them my way, strong, proud, and independent. The rancher nodded, a small smile playing on his lips.
I wouldn't expect anything less. As night fell, the ranch was quiet, peaceful, and safe.
The girl lay on her cot, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. From the auction, the ride, and the early days of resistance to the storms, challenges and trust that had shaped her. She had discovered the strength within herself, the value of trust, and the importance of respect and patience. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free. Free to be herself, free to trust, and free to grow.
The rancher, sitting on the porch, watched the stars appear one by one, knowing that their journey had created something rare and lasting, a bond built on courage, respect, and mutual understanding.
And so the story of the girl and the rancher reached its first peaceful chapter. Not an ending, but a beginning. A beginning of strength, trust, and the realization that independence and companionship could coexist. They had faced challenges, danger, and fear together, and emerged stronger, wiser, and closer than either had imagined. The ranch, the hills, and the wide open sky stood as a testament to what could be achieved when courage met patience, defiance met respect, and a spirit refused to be broken. The girl had claimed her independence, and in doing so had discovered that freedom was not only about standing alone, it was also about knowing when to trust, when to lean on others, and when to grow together. And as the stars shone brightly above, the girl knew one thing with certainty. No matter what the future held, she would face it strong, proud, and ready, with the knowledge that she was capable of anything and that trust and courage could walk hand in hand.